Welcome to Three Thoughts Zone. Thank you very much. Those of you who are here and those of you who are online, very grateful for this event. It's the last event of this season. It's been a very good season for us here. I want to give special thanks to Juan Santos, who has made this possible for me to run this version of my podcast in a live format. I've always felt it was important to not only have amazing guests that can share information, but also to be able to do that in a format that involves the community. I personally don't know many podcasts that do a regular live audience where people can then interact with the guests. So I'm proud and I'm thankful to Juan and Tavistock and Lake Nona. And those of you who are here, those of you who are always loyal, always here, thank you so much. Today, I'm very excited because I have two people here that I admire. One I've known a little bit longer. Ricardo I've known a little bit.
Just a little bit.
A little bit.
Last minute.
But you guys have done amazing things with your lives. And this podcast is about action. This podcast is about learning from people who've done difficult things across different facets of life and that have developed a way of life that could be mimicked or those of you who are watching that you can learn something from them and then take some action and hopefully see some changes in your life. So I have here, of course, Joe de Sena, founder and CEO of Spartan Group, and Ricardo Liborio, Jiu-Jitsu master and world champion. Thank you, both of you, for being here. It's the first time I do this with two guests at the same time. So thank you so much for being here. I want to start today. I'm going to start with Joe first, and then Ricardo. Give us a little bit of a background. Most people know who you are. Most people know who you are. But for those of you who don't, if you can give us a little bit of background on who you are and how did you get to be the person you are today in doing what you're doing today?
Thank you, sir. Thanks for having me. Grew up in Queens, New York. Grew up in, if you've seen the movie Goodfellas, grew up ground zero from Goodfellas. Parents had very unhealthy lifestyles. Everybody around us had an unhealthy lifestyle. My mom's mom, my grandmother, was sick in the 70s. She walks into a health food store, early 70s, probably the only health food store on the East Coast. Meets a yogi. Yogi gets her into cold showers, yoga, meditation, becomes vegan, long distance running. None of us wanted any part of it. It was crazy, it was stupid. We wanted eggplant parm heroes and Frito-Lay chips. And so my parents got divorced. Fast forward, I wanted to get back to the neighborhood. I wanted to have, rolls of $100 bills and Cadillacs and respect. Made my way to college, made my way to Wall Street, and then found what my mother was preaching 20-something years earlier, and that's when Spartan was born. I not only loved the transformation I went through in finding everything my mom had found, but I loved convincing other people to do the same.
That's awesome. How about you, Ricardo?
Well, I was born in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. I came to America in 1999, invited to actually work with Jiu-Jitsu. Before that, I started martial arts when I was 4 years old. I always loved this. For some reason, I never was good in team sports. I may be the only Brazilian guy who's really bad at soccer. I never was a soccer fan. That may be the reason why, because I've never played soccer pretty well. But I always liked the individual sports, which was always important to me. So in the Olympics, I was always watching wrestling and judo and boxing for some reason. But I always had a really good background in a certain way. My family was a middle class in Brazil. I had to go to good schools. I never had major issues with the education and really actually my life. But Brazil has this thing of being is a big parallel. You see the socio-economic display is such a gap. So you have somebody who's very rich nearby, somebody who's really poor, and you live that good and bad things, because the violence is real, is raw. You see violence in the streets. But at the same time, you learn how to deal with differences, which is very important in Brazil, and I think it brings to our culture and our business too. This differences and this way of bringing people in, feeling, make them feel welcome, make them feel that they belong to something is something that is important, not just for the Brazilian culture, for the jiu-jitsu itself. So it brings us to a different level of the business, which is the therapy. This is therapy. We all our guys here. It's a small community or a big community, but it's all about the therapy of doing something in community that helps a lot. That changes lives. Fast forward, I train a lot. I compete. I graduated in college in business, but I was so bad in business. I never was really good at this. I work in a bank, and at one point I say, you know what, I can't do this. It's not for me. I work in a bank in a suit and a tie. People were doubting that I was going to, tie on my tie, and I have to show those guys how to do it. But for me, it was like I quit working in a bank to do what I love. It was a big gap. It was a big leap of faith. It was a little bit of a scary moment. We put everything into something. The whole family, you crazy? You're going to work with jiu-jitsu? What is jiu-jitsu? Everybody thought it was a sushi place. They got to explain that jiu-jitsu is a martial arts coming, from Japan to Brazil. So I did some really good things, got some really good big fails, and restarted and everything. And basically, man, I love what I do. I think I help my community a lot, loving what I do and being a certain way successfully, in this journey and sharing, well, not our story, but helping others. Like, in the end, it's all about helping. You know this.
So we have a couple of things in common here, right? So you both come from places where there was some sort of adversity. You and I have talked about how it was like the movie Goodfellas, right? Where, if you've seen the movie, you know how that is. And I spent a lot of time in Rio. I love Rio de Janeiro, but I know exactly what you're talking about. There's the beauty of it and the people, but there's the areas where you just can't be careful enough, right? So there's a commonality there of coming from a place of adversity, right? And I find interesting that both of you have reached success by actually committing yourselves to manufacture adversities in your lives through the things that you do for yourself and the things that you do as part of your training in order to become a world champion. I titled the conversation that we're having today, Resiliency and Discipline, because I wanted to kind of hone in on that, because I think that if people learn this from you guys, it can be applicable to anybody's walk of life. So let's start with you, Joe, this idea of manufacturing adversity. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of people that don't need to manufacture adversity. If you think back to the 1500s or 2,000 years ago, we didn't need to manufacture adversity. Life was hard. We were dying of pandemics. We were fighting locusts, right? We just wanted the sun to rise and to not get eaten by a lion. But today, we've got climate controls, we've got Uber Eats, we've got everything we possibly want. I was with my cousin, 75-year-old cousin last night, actually, in Nevada. I hadn't seen him in a long time. His sister is dying, my aunt, and he's just watching TV for 5 hours in front of me, just sitting there. And I tried to explain to him, you have to get up. You have to take all the stuff my mother said. You got to take cold showers. You got to manufacture adversity in his life. And he looked at me like I was crazy. Why would I possibly do that? I said, because that's where the growth happens. That's where you become grateful, right? That's where you learn to meet yourself. That's where you become a better person. And you know that on the mats and jiu-jitsu. So it's not instinctual. Our brains, a lot of people don't know this, our brains are not wired to face adversity. They want to avoid it at all costs, because 2,000 years ago, it's what kept us alive. Don't go out and freeze to death. Don't go out and melt in the desert. Don't go out and take that risk on the cliff. And so we've still got that wiring, hardwire software wiring from 2,000 years ago, but we're living in an environment that doesn't require any work.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, we have this big kids program. It's funny, we were talking about this today, about how important it is for the kids to actually create not just the adversity itself. Look at this. A lot of parents are very much combined with the kids, and there is a big attachment to pleasure. So you take a kid and take him out of the iPad and ask him to do a physical activity. Many of the times, not that the kids doesn't want to be there, and we see this in martial arts school, the kids get there and they have so much fun and everything is perfect and they work out for 1 hour. But taking out of the iPad and put them in a car and take him to the martial arts, sometimes you have that crying period that a lot of the parents just bend it over and just really comply with this and said, it's okay, you quit. If they have the understanding how bad it is for a kid, have support in quitting in the little things like this, it's going to affect so much in the future. Any kid can do 2 hours of physical activity a week. We know this. There's nothing else. Especially if when you are there, you're having fun. If it's terrible, it's okay. You manage to try to negotiate something. But if it's not, it's that you just simply supporting your kid, not creating not just discipline, but is will. There's a strong will to keep doing what is important. It's like the difference between nice and good. You want to be nice to your kid? You give an ice cream for breakfast every day. You want to be good? You can't do that. You want to be good to your kid? You got to make them go and do physical stuff. Like you say, even if by getting out of the wire of pleasure, especially nowadays, everything is there. It's so easy. It's different. So we have a lot of these conversations with the parents about this. Man, you let them cry a little bit, coming over, because when they're here, they have a complete different idea or sensation than when they're at home and they ask to be stopped to watch the TV or listen to the music or do whatever they wanted to do for pleasure themselves. So we see this a lot. And the way we build, you said it, discipline and grit is success for everything you do in life. If you don't support this in the beginning, they have to figure it out by themselves in the end. That's hard. You didn't support them. We see this a lot. Thank God we have so many of our parents here right now that give us this support to listen what we're trying to accomplish with this, which is, Rafi, what is the martial arts? What is the race itself? No, it's all here. It's all in the spirit here. When you can break through the things and can see it, the benefits of this are breaking through in your mind, in your physical, it's priceless.
I didn't know this, but I'm good friends with a brain surgeon, and he cuts heads open for a living. And he said they can see on the brain tracks that are laid when people take on, especially young children, take on hard work and complete the mission. They see a track. When the kid quits because they get handed an iPad or ice cream or whatever, they see a gap. The more gaps you have on the physical brain, the more likely you are to quit things. It makes sense in the future, to your point. And so I tell kids, we have a death camp we hold every summer for 2 weeks. We gotta lay tracks on the brains. And if I let the kids speak to the parents, especially, like a Zoom call or something, they immediately start crying. Here we are working, we're in ice cold water, we're carrying rocks up mountains, we're getting through the day, we're eating healthy food, everything's going great. See the parent on the iPad start crying, because that's a safety net. They've learned that if I pull that lever, mom and dad come with a parachute, they come with ice cream, they let me get out of it, they put a gap in the brain.
So let's talk about, expand on that a little bit, right? I feel like today we have maybe not a healthy concept of failure. I know I was taught, and my parents, did the best they could with the tools they had, but this idea of not failing, right? This idea of if you do this, you may fail. If you do this, you may not find or attain what you're looking for, right? As I've grown older, now in my 50s, I don't see things as pass or fail. I see them more as learning. What are your thoughts on that, based on your experience with what you do?
Well, it makes sense. As kids, we don't want to get Fs in school. We get yelled at if we don't do well, right? So failing becomes a bad thing. The real negative there is, does it lead to not taking risks? Because we want to take healthy risks. Maybe from the neighborhood I grew up in, I don't know why I learned this idea of upside, downside decision making at a very young age. What's the upside to this? What's the downside? Could I die? That's too much downside. Am I just going to stub my toe? That's fine. I could live with that. And how much am I going to gain if we knock the ball out of the park? So for me, I understood at a very young age that I could take risk, and it's probably helped me in entrepreneurship and in life in general. I met my wife. We were married. We made the decision to get married within a week. Upside down. This is what I get if I get married. This is what I get if I don't. Quick decision. It's upon us to teach young people, peers, everybody, that taking risk is okay. This is not the 1400s. This is not 2,000 years ago. We're not going to get killed with a spear or a lion or a locust, right? So go out, take the risks. That's where you grow. And there shouldn't be a negative stigma attached to failure. I was actually, right before this podcast, I was talking to a buddy of mine who owns a very, very large business, multi-billionaire. And within a month, his big merger he's working on, he needed to come up with $5.5 billion for this merger. It's either pass or fail. And he said, I'm going for it. And I'm okay if it doesn't work. And that's a hard, I mean, there's big stakes there. Yeah. But really it's just ego. Yeah. He's not gonna be out on the streets and live in a favela in Brazil if it doesn't work. And if he succeeds, he'll be a genius. So we need to teach that. We need to teach kids that failure is learning.
Yeah. Well, it's for the kids. It's so instinct that they have it right now. We see it on Instagram, and everything is in the best profile, the most beautiful, the most delicious, the most whatever it is there. But to get there, it's a process itself. We all know, maybe because of maturity, but there is one thing. How much more our kids start stopping, being afraid of failure and being afraid of never trying. It's the thing about the competition teaches a lot. And at one point, people are not afraid to compete, especially in the sports, in combat sports, because you're going to get hurt. No, the training hurts much more than the day of the competition, much more. People, it's a myth. Oh, they're afraid to get hurt. No, people are afraid to be embarrassed in front of the others. That's why people don't compete as much. But being afraid in front of the others is because you did not have, number one, a good, secure system. Like, I see my parents right there, I see my guys. I see that my guys, doesn't matter how to go, they're going to be with me. So if I got in a competition tomorrow and I lose tomorrow, they know in me that they don't care about my failures. They care about me reaching up happiness or whatever makes sense for them. So I know that I have that secure community behind me. This makes me feel secure if I fail. A lot of kids don't have this. A lot of parents, adults don't have this. But you being afraid to try something, it's so much worse than you being afraid to lose. And you see this in competition everywhere. If you see this in adults that are afraid to raise their hands to be exposed in front of the others. They're like, here right now, are you afraid? Not really. I live so much, Rafa, in a certain way that if you guys don't like me, I'll be fine, man. I'll be okay. It's not that I don't want you guys to like me. I do. But if you don't, man, I will live with that. I'll be fine with this. And I come back in the next day. Discipline is everything. If you punch the clock in the next day, it makes the whole sense. You come back in the next day, it doesn't matter how you feel. Joe, how many winners you have in a Spartan race?
Well, that's a funny question. We have too many winners. We went into age groups, and everybody I meet says, I won the race. And how could it be that 9 people won the race? But they won it for this age group or that age group.
It's okay, but how many?
But the reality is everybody that crosses the finish line is a winner.
That's it.
Yeah.
And that's it. And sometimes it's the better at the time, the better of, physical appearance, whatever it is into these things. But imagine if your kids think this way. Imagine if a teenager can feel this way and understanding the loss is part of the game, because you're going to lose. And at one point, you're going to lose in life. You grow up and your grandparents are going to die, your parents are going to die, your dog is going to die. You better get used to losing and keep on going. Otherwise, you build up frustration. who builds up desperation, who builds up all the bad stuff, all the self-medicine and everything else, you know. We have a chance, but what do we do? To speak with the kids. We have this little mini mat chats that we talk about everything, especially, you know, determination, especially discipline, especially, hey, suck it up, buttercup. Come back in the next day. You'll be fine, you know.
So let's talk about that for a
Wait,
moment.
I want to dive down on that at 1 second. As you were talking, Ricardo, I was thinking, fear is a good thing, also in the sense that there's a paradox there. When people sign up for one of our events or sign up to one of your gyms or sign up for a competition, they're scared, which we're saying you don't need to be scared. But that fear, that scared, leads to, I better go to bed early. I better wake up early. I better put down the glass of wine. I better not eat the cookie. I better become disciplined.
Sure.
So we want our events to be scary on the one hand, and we want them to be so scared that they change their lifestyle. So it is a paradox, right? Because don't be afraid to fail. It's just to learn. But I want you to be afraid. I want you to be afraid to be embarrassed because I want you to change your life and act differently.
Well, yeah, no, you just reminded me of, I'm pretty sure it was Laird Hamilton, the pro surfer.
Yeah.
Many years ago, he was asked in an interview, how did he manage to not be afraid of the big waves? Because he was one of the first people who started doing this crazy thing, being pulled by a sea-doo so he can catch
Toe in,
yeah. And his answer is like, no, I'm very afraid. The day I'm not afraid, that's the day that I'm not going to train, and that's when I'm going to die. Right. As I am very afraid of those waves, and because of that fear, I train every day, and I have a strategy in mind, so that's in parallel to what you're saying, yeah. But what I wanted to, all of this is good, but we know humans are creatures of habit, right? And humans are creatures of comfort. You know, we are wired to look for comfort and to avoid adversity. That is, from an evolutionary perspective, all we need is we need to sleep, we need to eat, and we need to reproduce, and we need to stay safe, right? And that's it. So both of you work with adults and children in the things that you do. And I assume that in order to get that level of consistency that you need in order to be able to finish the race, or that your people need in order to be able to do an event and do it well, that they have to follow some sort of process. And I'm also going to assume that that process is different for an adult than it is for a child. Can you expand a little bit on that? Like, how do you get the adults going versus the young people?
Look, I think about my own journey. When I signed up for something hard and it scared me, it forced me to take action every single day. And when I did that for long enough, I felt the benefits. I felt the days when I did the workout versus the days I didn't do the workout. I felt the days when I ate well versus the days I didn't eat well. And I optimized for wanting more of the good days and less of the bad days. But I also noticed when I did not have a date on the calendar, I became that ancient species. I just want to sit on the couch, right? Eat, drink, and reproduce. So we have to have dates on the calendar. Now, children, they don't necessarily have that cerebral capacity. So for me, like it or hate it, we ran a military operation with our 4 children and all their friends and everybody that would join in. And there were, here were the standards, and they weren't going to change, and it didn't matter if it was a birthday or a weekend or if we were getting on a plane for a 20-hour flight. We were doing 300 burpees in the airport because we had to get our workout in. We were eating healthy. You could push too hard. There's lots of stories where, think about Agassi or whoever it may be that say, my dad pushed me too hard and you pushed me out of it. So there is a delicate balance. It's a knife's edge. It's no different than the military. I've spoken to lots of military folks that say they stretch the rubber band, they take us right to the edge. Hopefully they don't kill us, and then they retract a little bit and we go a little further the next time. So I'm certainly no genius here, but I've had 19 years with my kids, and so far it appears I haven't broken them.
Yeah, that's important. Well, being a little bit different on it, I just made me think about something. One of the most challenging things on a martial arts side is this: you got to make weight. You talk about pleasure. You talk about, savage and instinct or whatever it is. It's being hungry. Or even worse than that, worse than being hungry is being thirsty. I have seen working with fighters my whole life, and I work with the highest level, the UFC champions. I've been working with 3-year-olds and the UFC champion there. And the worst part that makes everybody fade is really dehydration and the hunger. And that's something that everybody should be trying, because it's such a basic instinct that we're more familiar with cold and hot or not asleep, but hunger, we're not. So it's just for everybody who's listening to right now. If you just try one day to put yourself in the shoes of somebody who really are hungry right now, you start to second think about, how this thing, how blessed we are in so many ways. And a lot of our adults, like you say, there's the hardest part of the martial arts, Rafi, is break through the door, open the door and coming in. A lot of our parents, our students, so it's much easier because they see the environment. But again, you're still breaking through your own fears and your own ability to deal with your failures, because you're going to tap a lot every day. You started, you make sure of one thing: you're going to get submitted, and you're going to be frustrated because you thought that you were something. We may thought as a male living and raised in a certain environment, you think you can fight. And when you go to a martial arts school like this and you just know that you can't, and you have to really restructure your ego, and look into this. So there is so much things. But in the end, it's not about the martial, man, it's community. It's people. You know this. It is people. Even in the military, you'll learn a big deal with discipline and everything else, and the stretching band. You go from there, but in the end, they're a solid group of people that share that pain with you, and then you know that the difference is forever. It's priceless.
I want to expand on something you said. That little nuance there is, years ago, I was doing crazy races all over the world, and I had the experience that a wrestler or a jiu-jitsu fighter has, which is starvation and lack of water, and giardia and dysentery, and losing 32 pounds because I was so I had that taste. What I learned from it was not the bad. What I learned from it was the gratitude when I got the water, and the gratitude when I got the food. And the best story ever was I had all these Wall Street buddies, and I brought them out to experience it. And just a week before, we were in Sparks Steakhouse in New York City. And one of the guys returned the steak. It wasn't cooked right. The other guy didn't like the salt on it, this and that. The next week, when we were out doing this stuff, the hamburger meat I had, which was a day old that we were cooking on a fire, fell into the charcoals, and they were eating it with their hands and the dirt, and this was the best meat they ever had.
With the bugs.
With the bugs.
With the bugs.
They didn't return anything. And the point is, they were so grateful, and so the benefit you get from doing these hard things and being disciplined and removing things from your life is you start to appreciate the things we have.
That's true.
I'm sorry, I love this topic, but there's the ancient samurai. Apparently would burn everything in their life every night before bed. They'd burn their family, imaginary burning. They'd burn their house, their possessions, everything. So when they woke up, they appreciated everything they had. So,
Such a skill, huh? Great gratitude. It's such a skill. Yeah.
And that applies for children too, right? Because you have a story about French fries with your kids.
Yes.
You want to share that with the audience?
So we were living in Vancouver at the time, and I have a friend of mine who's an accountant, slightly overweight, definitely not a super athlete. He suggested in the spring in Vancouver that we were going to hike a mountain in Squamish with the kids. So I had my 4 children, he had his 2 children, the wives were away. We're going to go hike this mountain. Sunny day. Do we need anything? We don't need anything. I've done this. I did this 20 years ago. It's an easy hike. Anyway, 8 hours later, we're on top of the mountain, and we see a group coming over the peak with glacier goggles, snowshoes, pickaxes. I said, I thought we didn't need anything. No, it's fine. Anyway, it was a very serious situation. I thought we were going to have to eat one of the kids that night. It was a rugged situation. Thank God everybody survived. We made it back to the car the next morning. The kids were starving. They said, can we stop for Wendy's? I said, no, we're not getting junk food. We're going to drive another hour. We're going to get healthy food. Please, please, can we stop? I said, all right, everybody's going in and getting one small order of French fries. That's it. Then we're going to go get healthy food. They went in. They got the small order of French fries. They spilled the whole thing on the floor of the Wendy's. They were eating the French fries. If this was the week earlier, he touched my French fry. I can't eat these right now.
Joe, 100%. So it's a skill. You live in this thing, and this is what a Spartan, I think, does that.
Yeah.
And in any sports itself. But the thing about the martial arts, the combat sports has one thing. I've never played tennis before or ping pong or anything like that, but look at this, and this is important. You know, when you really face a situation that you really got to fight for your life. You have somebody who has, you know, some health issues, or you do have health issues. The guy who had done something like this, he lived something special that put you in a position to talk about fighting different than the other person, that he's just facing something like this in life. So for us, you know, we're training every day, you know, in different levels. And you get tapped a lot. If you think it's tapping, or if you get submitted, or you lost your training, it is a way to be humiliated. Man, it's all right. You just build up such a mental resistance for that. That builds up in the time that you need it, and we're all going to need it at one point, a time to fight. And that's what I think that your business does, my business does, create certain edge in a person that the nurse doesn't have, or the IT guys, the real estate guy, the accountant may never face this in life before, and you have the little edge in life. Man, you got tapping stage. You did what? Nobody was going to understand, but those guys have this little taste on it. You know.
I agree.
That's something that's special for all of us.
So how do we go? This is what you guys do. You've been doing it all your life. You've been doing it most of your life. For the people that are listening, who have the average American life right now, right? You know, you're in either a business owner, or you work in a corporation or whatnot, and you're busy, and you got kids and families and student associations and whatnot. How do they get started? What are the steps to take in order to start creating a life where you're a bit more grateful for what you have, you're a bit more prepared for what's coming, you're less reactive because of that preparation, right? What are some of the things, and maybe if you bring examples of some of your clients in the past, so I'm sure you've seen transformations from, you know, what we call everyday people, you know, like me or like anybody else who's listening, right? How do they, in your experience, can get started in order to create the level of manufactured adversity that are going to make them more resilient and more disciplined in their lives?
So we've had 11 million people cross the finish line over the years. There's 8 billion people on Earth, and there's a bunch of them that don't need it, that live in really rugged places and they live a hard life. But for those that are in the first world that have an easy life, the people you're describing, the answer they're going to be giving you, the answer they give me or you, as to why they're not starting is they're not in shape, they're not ready, they're too busy, right? Everybody's got these BS excuses. They need to sign up. They need to sign up for your gym. They need to sign up for our race. They need to sign up for a 5K run in their neighborhood. Something hard, and they got to go public with it. They got to tell everybody they're doing it. So now they're public. They're going to be, you know, practicing jujitsu, whatever it may be. They got to tell everybody this is what they're doing, because they'll be embarrassed if they don't actually deliver on what they're telling people. And everything changes from there. Now, if we think about my cousin that I was with last night, the one I described sitting on the couch in his 70s that's on his way out, I said it's simple. Like, I got to meet people where they are, so I don't want to give them something that's too complicated. I said, you know, wake up and go for a walk. Get some sunlight when the sun's coming up. Doesn't have to be, I'm not asking you to run 50 miles. Take a cold shower when you're done. Don't eat until 11 a.m. God forbid, don't eat till 11 a.m. in the morning, right? Starve yourself till 11 a.m. Think about all of our ancestors that would have loved to get a meal at 11 a.m. They didn't see a meal for days. So really simple things, but you got to sign up. You got to tell everybody you're doing it. You got to be completely committed, because you'll be embarrassed if you're not, and everything changes. And again, I got 11 million examples of this working.
Awesome. This is beautiful. Well, for us is, like we're saying, I've talked to my partner, Graham, it's very hard to cross the door on a martial arts school. People are so literally afraid of doing this. We have strategies for this. You cannot put a tough guy in front of that full of tattoos in your front desk. You got to put a lady. Well, I do have a tough guy in front of me on my front desk, but you got to make so appealing, that when the smile breaks, the fear. But you're so right. It's the same reason why people don't try and accomplish things in life, because they're afraid to start. Or they want to try to be too perfect to start. They waited to be in shape. They waited to be, in the best mental state or the best incentive or build up their discipline. No, you start. You start. And for us, in our case, in your case too, I guarantee you this, in the end, you're not going to stay there because of just a race or just a martial arts. You're going to stay because of your community, because it's a good community. And you want to bring your kids in, because if your kids are in, you see the value on your kids, or if you are in, you see the value on yourself, you're going to bring your kids in. It's a priceless grace. But I always say that for martial arts, in competition, combat sports, you have an inner bully in you, always saying, you're not going to accomplish this, you're not going to make it happen. That's the same bully that talks about sleep 5 minutes more, eat the cookie, eat the pizza. That's an inner bully. That this guy is a liar. You don't need to listen to this thing, but you take a while for you to understand, because you think it's you, and you think you're different because you have that. All of us do have it. We all have it. It's the same guy. It's just at one point you're not listening anymore. It's not that he's not going to come in. He's going to come. He's going to talk. He's going to do this and that. For us, his competition is like, oh, you're going to get submitted in the first 5 seconds. Oh, you're going to be humiliated in front of people. That's the same reason that our guys sometimes they don't go, because I'm not in shape. I'm going to get my butt kicked. No, that's the inner bully talking to you. It's probably not going to happen. But you just got in at one point with discipline. You solved that problem. With discipline, you're not going to be able to listen to this thing anymore. You're just going to do what you got to do. And that's it. That's medicine.
You just gave me a big idea. When I started my business, I couldn't get people to do it. So I lied to them. I told them it was a barbecue weekend. They didn't know they were being the ones barbecued. When you just mentioned that you need to have a different person at the front desk, whatever the name, like, you should change the imagery on your front window of your place, and it should look like a sushi place. And they come in.
Oh my God. This is a true story. That's a true story. Look at this. It's a true story. Before, I had this company called American Top Team, which ended up being the best martial art, fight team in the world. We came from Brazil. We opened up this big, massive fight factory. We had all the accomplishment that you can be. So we did everything. We had 90 schools that we opened up in the United States and around the world. But at one point there, the name of the brand was American Top Team. So people had no idea what American Top Team actually is. So we had the brilliant idea to put a jiu-jitsu on the bottom. We put this on the mall, and everybody, American Top Team Jiu-Jitsu. Everybody was think that was a sushi place.
Love it.
Everybody tried to reserve a table.
Business was booming. Come on in.
We should have put a table in the middle of the match right there and let those guys do it. So that was failure after failure until we started getting, until failure is not so hurtful anymore, It's easier for the young crowd in a certain way, because it's easier for the older crowd, because we live so much into this thing. We're create a callous, mentally strained onto it. But for the young, like we say, we have the young kids, they are so afraid to raise their hand to ask the questions. For us, we're building up this in them. No, raise your hand, be a leader. Just don't be afraid of, to improve. to get better. You know what I'm talking about this.
Yeah.
For us, it's a little bit easier because we find a way to channel this conversation, through technology, TVs and the massive communication that we have with the kids there, so they're listening to it. Well,
So I want to share with you a little anecdote that came to me a couple of years ago, and see, if you can give me some feedback on it, because I'm a believer that as we grow older, like we all have a toolbox that we carry with us, and this toolbox allows us to navigate through life. And you open the toolbox and you have the tools to solve the problems that are coming day to day. So a couple of years ago, when I started this podcast, in one of the episodes I talked about just an imaginary example of a person that has to hike or has to engage in a trek from Sri Lanka to Mount Everest, right? And for those who know, Sri Lanka is just an island in the south of India. So if you start in Sri Lanka, it's subtropical, and you pack the tools for the journey, what are you going to have? Well, you're going to have things
Shorts.
you're going to be in shorts, right? You're going to have T-shirts. You're going to have things, maybe bug spray, whatever. You're going to have tools that are going to be useful in the environment that you're expecting you're going to face. So you go through this process and you're doing well, and at some point, you're in the mainland now, and now you start climbing. And at some point, you're at 18, 19,000 feet, base camp, right? Whatever base camp is. And then the environment is different. But you still have your exact same toolbox and tools that you did when you came to, started in Sri Lanka. So our ego starts telling us, just like you said, you start seeing people coming down with pickaxes and oxygen, but the ego says, well, this toolbox has gotten me here.
sure.
It's been good to me. I have made it all this way with this. Not going to change. Keep going. Now, chances are, is it possible to make it to the summit with that same toolbox? Nothing is impossible, but it's highly improbable. So I believe we have to live a life of upgrading our toolbox on a regular basis. Two questions. Number one, do you agree? And if you do, how has your toolbox changed over the years?
The story makes me think of Ivan Krupp. He bicycled from Sweden to Everest and climbed it during, I think it was 1996 disaster where a bunch of people died. It's an incredible story you have to read. Literally solo, bicycled it, carried every bit of gear from Sweden the whole way, got there, people were dying on the mountain. He said, oh my God, I gotta go help. Threw on a backpack by himself, went up, saved a bunch of Swedes, came down, and then soloed by himself and bicycled home. So, but he had the right tools because he came from Sweden. He didn't come from Sri Lanka. But look, I don't think we're gonna upgrade any of our tools if we don't put ourselves in uncomfortable situations, if we don't leave the island. So you've got to leave the island, you've got to be a little cold, you've got to be tired, you've got to be hungry. That requires you to quickly look in your pocket, your toolbox, around you, find friends, come up with solutions. If you don't get yourself out of your comfort zone, you're never going to need other tools. So the real question you got to ask is, do I have to get the tools first, or should I get myself uncomfortable first? And I would argue, get yourself uncomfortable first. It'll force you to get the tools. You'll never know what tools you need until you're in that situation. And we live in a world where you could just, Uber, DoorDash, the tools you need. So, it's not like the old days. You don't have to take the Silk Road.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll find a way or you'll find an excuse.
There you go.
That's it.
Great saying.
But now, for fighting itself is a little bit, no, it's not different, but you mentioned mission as CEO of the company, right? That sometimes you lose it. There's a big parallel onto this thing because you fail big and you're coming back again sometimes from zero. A fighter, for example, the feelings that you have when you lose a fight in UFC and you're close to get to the title shot, it's so painful. But he got to make sure that in the next 2 months, he is completely regrouped and finding the toolbox. The reason why that happened. You know, sometimes, man, sometimes it's the day. Sometimes you be getting sick, and you do not know you're sick, but you're getting sick. Sometimes you're depressed. Sometimes whatever it is, like tons of excuses, but you got to find a way to not fall in the same problems again. For the toolbox, I'll tell you this: you stop learning, you die. Period. I have so many champions. There is one of the guys. I'll give you a good example. I don't know if you ever heard about Robbie Lawler. Robbie Lawler was a big UFC champion at one time. And this guy, when he came train with us, he was coming from, I don't even know how many losses. He was coming from the huge prospect in UFC to simply, living in Iowa, simply stop doing what you're supposed to do to evolve. And when he moved to Florida, he knew that was something different. Not just the toolbox. And he's going to learn more, but he's going to be do things different, right? Things different. And one point, let's give an example. Some of the fighters don't train hard anymore. They don't spar anymore. The guys have to a level of knowledge at this level here right now that when you start really putting themselves in danger to get hurt, they don't fight, which is for them the way to be sustainable, but also to achieve their goals. So they do not spar anymore.
Wow.
They do a lot of drilling, a lot of conditioning, a lot of learning, and save everything for the fight in the end. You have to build up and to have that the toolbox that we're talking about here. How many fighters I know, like Robbie Lawler, that started losing it, or a big gap of losing it, and have to really regroup to learn again, to get there. And how you regroup here. Because sometimes you know you have the talent, but you don't have the necessary academic tools into learning, you know, or the place that you're in it, you know, you got to make a move. You got to do something that is uncomfortable. You got to move from Iowa to Florida, not knowing anybody, and bring his whole family to achieve the goal to be UFC champion one day. You know, all this I have seen so many times, so many stories. That's not even funny. I have one of the most athletic human beings that I've seen in my life. His name is Joel Romero. Joel Romero was a fighter from Cuba who was a wrestler. He was an amazing wrestler. This guy is unbelievable. But he did not like to train the way it's funny about this. It goes through the technology too. He did not like to train the way we actually study, which is sometimes much faster. He's set in a way as a Cuban, if you don't know how that works there, the conditioning there, it lasts 3 hours. The Cuban fighter losing weight, that means that he's going to take 2 hours to cut down and run and do the, calisthenics, everything to lose weight. It's completely different that we learn how to cut weight nowadays. It's the technology. It's the shrinking the time. We work effectively and it's smarter. And sometimes they have to get this leap of faith and believe in what we say, to actually achieve their goals. And we've seen this a lot, man. It's just so much. But if you stop learning, you simply die. That's it. Simple as it is.
So, do you believe that timing is a factor in all this? And what I mean by that is, you've been in a situation where you have, someone that comes to you because they want you to help them, or they want to sign up for a race or whatnot, and no matter what you do, they just don't do it. And is that a function of it's just not the right time for that individual, or is that not even a factor?
I mean, I've convinced all kinds of people to do stuff that they don't want to do. I'm really, really good at getting people to do that. So it's just getting the right communication tool. It could be making believe it's a sushi restaurant. It could be me talking to them. It could be their friend. I've had lots of people. I had a 696-pound guy come out and do our race. He said he had his friends brought him. He had no idea. So we just got lucky. We need our audience. We need the world. We need more of you. We need more of us that are out roping people in. It's the right time for everybody. there's no guarantee that person's going to be around tomorrow, right? We don't,
Yeah.
no guarantees here. So people need to go do hard. They need to grow. They need to fight through their fears. They need to be cold, hungry, tired. And we owe it to our communities to bring them to the mat, bring them to the start line, and make it happen.
This is,
One last, I've got guys with no legs, no arm, like, time, no.
so
You said it.
beautiful,
You
though.
said it best, right? Find your way or find your excuse. I love it.
Yeah. Well, this. Well, I'm just going to repeat your words here right now.
Yeah.
You know, this is really, in the end of the story, you got to keep moving to try to get better in anything you do in life. Life will throw a curveball. Life will test you. Life will make you fight at one point. We're make a race. We're going to make you uncomfortable. We can't just think that we're going to be comfortable all the time and live in pleasure. That's impossible. It's unrealistic, you know. One of the things about the martial arts itself, it's in a safe community that you can bring it in, you know. And we see this. How many of the parents have started believing what we do, and they suddenly, when you see it, transform your life. But for us, this is therapy. We know this. It's not just a physical therapy. This is mental therapy. Because jiu-jitsu for us is the yoga for the tough guy. That's what it is, you know, and we know this. So I so agree with you in so many ways. Go there, test yourself, get out of comfort zone, be okay with losing, be okay to be comfortable in the uncomfortable, because life is going to test you for that, you know. And if you don't do this, it's in the couch. And you know how we see this? We see so many critics on the keyboard. They're so courageous.
They're so strong.
Yes, so strong, so courageous, but you're not doing anything, or you never did anything like this.
Well, this is a big point. One thing that I'm sure drives you crazy, drives me crazy, is we are a society, we are a world of spectators,
That's true.
right? Who's in the arena?
Yeah.
Tiny fraction
Oh.
of the population,
That's one of my favorite.
right? Who's in the arena?
Theodore
We're sitting
Roosevelt.
there, we're upset about this team or that team losing or this jerk. Like,
Yeah.
are you kidding me? You get out there.
Yeah, the man in the arena.
Yeah.
Yeah, this, guys, this is what it is. In the end, for us as leaders, and you know this, you know, Joe, you know this, you can't listen to anyone. You just got to do what you got to do. You wake up. Rafi, how many people just told you not to do this? How many people told me that I would not be able to be successful in America, you know, and or whatever it is in there. You know, for me, it's like, it's not that I want to prove no, I just don't want to prove anybody wrong. I just know I'm very fortunate because I love what I do. I love what I do. It's simple for me. You know, I'm not going to work, pushing hard, and then, you know, I just like it. I'm one of those guys. But at the same time, whoever is starting something right now that every odds is against them, do it. No excuses, you know, just do that. Go fail big, and come back again. Period.
Well, I don't know about simple. I was told that there's only 5 other humans alive that have accomplished what you have accomplished.
Oh,
you know,
no,
in the,
no. It's
in
just-
the
I'm
jiu-jitsu.
just old enough in the game, that's it.
And
you know,
he killed 4 of them.
No, I'm one of those fortunate guys, man. And I know, you know, besides it all, I'm fortunate enough to have my partner, Grant, that deals with the problems, he deals with the BS, no, and I just do what I love, man. I really like it. You know, of course, you know, all the problems are coming in, but I decided to do what I love. And that was a big turning point for me. I work in a bank. I was talking to Joe about this. I graduated in business in Brazil, and I work in a bank of Brazil, you know, which is a government bank there. I was a manager into it. And you know, like I said before, it was never for me. This is what my father wanted for me, what my mom wanted for me. And at one point, I got out of there and I say, hey, I'm leaving the bank, and I'm working with jiu-jitsu, which everybody thought it was a sushi bar. Nobody knew what a jiu-jitsu in 1996, guys. You know, this was right after Hoist Gracie created, with UFC in 1993. 3 years later, it was about to move the U.S., working with jiu-jitsu. Everybody, you're nuts. That's impossible. Why are you doing it with your life? And I said, man,
But that's how you know it's the right thing.
yeah,
Right?
that's true. And I just, like I say, we're just keeping on going. Punch the clock, come back in the next day, keep doing it. Believe in yourself. Speak into the mirror, believe in yourself. Even when the inner bully, you keep him talking to you, believe in it. You look in the mirror, fight for it. For me, it was a little bit easier because I had passion for this. So it was something that is easy to see.
Let's talk about that 1 second. Is there's going to be moments where you question the decision you made,
No.
and you don't think you're capable, and you have a really bad day. We all I have them, you have them, you have them. What I found is there's nothing in life you can't walk off. Let's go for a walk, knock out some burpees, go to bed, wake up in the morning, new day. My friends like to tell me when I'm having a tough day, put on a fresh pair of socks.
Yeah, that's true.
Get back in the game.
Yeah, for us, it's just go roll, go train.
Right.
Yeah.
That's it. This
Go
is
for a
for
run.
us, it's the mindfulness. For us, it's the mindfulness. When we train, we're in a zone right there. You got to survive, so you better be concentrated on what's happening over there. But in the end, it's your community, especially if you have something that you really love, like even if it's your family. Find them, got that picture, whatever it is there. What is important to you? What is important to you, Joe? That's going to make you wake up in the morning. What is going to make you go through, all the fire, all the problems and everything else? For me, it's so clear. Besides that, I have my family that I love so much. It's so easy for me. When I go to compete, got the picture so clear to me.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I had the good fortune, I think it was this past year, at the Impact Forum here, met the gentleman who wrote the book about the blue zones. You remember we were talking about this a while back, and it was great to just have like a 30-second conversation with him. But I had read his book before, and blue zones, for people not familiar with them, is areas in the world where people that have the highest percentage of people over 100 living in a healthy way still, right? So people, for some reason that he was trying to find out, they get to live over 100 while still being highly functional and highly active in their lives. And after so many years of figuring out if it was the diet, it wasn't, because this was different parts of the world where the diets were different. Some they were thinking maybe it was, these people don't consume alcohol. Well, no, these ones do, and these ones smoke. Yeah. And so there's after everything, they came up with a couple of nuggets, which is, well, they're all active, number one.
Physically active.
Physically active, right? They get up every day and they do certain things. But they actually narrow it down to the sense of community. Is that if a bunch of 90-year-olds are playing cards on Tuesday night, and we're in that group, say, in another 40 years,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden Joe is not showing up, we're gonna go walk over,
Yeah.
knock on his
Just
door,
make sure.
right? Make sure that you didn't fall and broke your hip, and you know this. We know we have your back. I know you have my back. That knowledge of that you have a community of people that support you, that got your back or that have your back, is something that I'm very passionate about, that I've tried to build here in Lake Nona, which is why you're all here. Because I grew up in Panama, and I grew up at a time where people didn't need appointments to show up at my house. My mom passed away a couple years ago, but she would tell you that when I was in college in the late 80s, early 90s, my friends would show up to my house knowing that I was working and that I wasn't home, because they knew that they would ring the doorbell and my mom would look at them and say, like, "You're hungry, right? You haven't eaten today. Come on in." And then she will cook some food, and then she would proceed to play dominoes and take all their money, right? So that sense of community, I'm so happy that you've created a worldwide community of people that are willing to tattoo your logo on themselves, right? And you have a community of
I
people.
have my community right here.
Well, some of
Look at
them are
that.
right here, but throughout your life, you've created a community wherever you go. Make no mistake, we have to go back to some of that. What are your comments on that?
It is community. I was at one of our races recently. Where the heck was I? In Greece, in Sparta. And I saw, I checked as I would the obstacles, and I checked the start line and the finish line and the production schedules. And I looked around and I said, this is so unbelievable. It's so incredible. What is it? It's none of that. It's the community. It's the thousands of people that are here. You could get rid of the obstacles. You can get rid of everything. It's just the people, the energy, the we got your back. That's the whole business.
That's it. That's Joe. That's it. Family is everything, man.
Yeah,
Community
indeed.
is everything.
Indeed.
It's everything. It's just priceless. As much money you can make it into it, you can't. If you don't have that, if you don't have your community, your people in it, you know that is your people.
You got nothing.
You got nothing.
Yeah, we're
You
not
got a bunch
islands.
of money. You can't take this. You're not going to take anything. You're not going to take it. In the end, you're not going to take it. It's memory. If you have money, you can buy great memories and help others. And when you figure it out what you came in this life to do, and you help others, now you're in the right set. Now you can go with the mind full of gratitude, no regret. That's what it is, man. I'm very happy about what I do and and what I choose. It's very important to me, and I know that a lot of people will find their way too.
But I want to give you opportunity to folks to ask some questions. This has been great, and of course, we'd love to keep having this conversation, but I want to be respectful of your time. Are there any questions from the crowd for either Joe or Ricardo or both, please? Oh, we have one over here in the front. Oh, no, is that you?
I was going
Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
You'll be second. Okay. No, we should be good.
Okay.
So I love everything you guys have been saying this whole night. It all really kind of relates to each other, but, going through stressful situations and everything. I want to get your thoughts on the Biosphere 2 study. It's kind of popular, but it was back in the 90s. These scientists were building biospheres to study how plants grow, on their own in these contained environments, so that eventually it can take, all of this stuff to space and travel and have self-sustaining ecosystems all on their own, right? And so they ran into the situation with Biosphere 2, which is all of these big, tall trees, and they kept all falling over, right? And they're breaking in half and everything, and they're wondering, what's wrong? What's wrong with the soil? What's wrong with stuff? Turns out the answer was that it was too perfect, right? The trees had everything they needed. Everything was provided for them, the perfect conditions, right? And the reason why they were falling over is because there was no wind. There was no stress for these trees to actually grow deep roots and, become a strong tree. And I think everything you guys are saying points straight back to the same thing, where you need to kind of have adversity to become strong in your situations.
Joe.
Yeah, no, I've been saying it for years. Would you rather be the tree? We have a farm up in Vermont where this was all started. Would you rather be the tree that grew up in the greenhouse on that farm, or would you rather be the tree that grew up on the side of the mountain with roots wrapped around the rocks, dealing with the storms in the winter? Carlos, who's sitting in the crowd here, he was that tree in that biosphere. He was too perfect. Everything was. Look, he's embarrassed for those of you
Time
that
to
are
pick on
listening.
Carlos.
He's covered, and we turned him into that tree with the roots wrapped around the rocks. Not great for me because now all he wants to do is go play on mountains instead of working. But great example of taking that perfect tree and turning him into a rugged tree.
Well, it's kind of sad that we have to create some sort of a, bad environment to try to get those kids to feel, like you say, that the Spartan was created to make people feel something different. Getting out of the comfort of, at least of comfort of the city, and feel cold, feel hungry, does that mean?
No.
Feel tired, and all those things here right now.
Feel, that's the word, right? Feel.
Yeah.
Feel.
Well, and there's a great example of that just, before the next question, Austin, is some of the most expensive olive oil in the world that has the highest concentration of polyphenols, which is one of the great compounds that is in olive oil, actually grows in Morocco, in the middle of a desert, because of the stress is under. They don't grow very big. That's why it's expensive, because the yield is very, very small. But because they have to do whatever it is to survive, that olive oil is just so powerful, for us as humans. So right along the lines of what you were saying. Next question, please.
Okay. It's for to both. And my question is, since we're talking about resilience, what would be the biggest or the largest or most impactful challenge that you had faced in your lives, each of you, that maybe stand out, and what lessons have you learned specifically from them?
Well, I can start with this. So, my daughter was 1.5 years old, almost 1.5 years old, and she had a condition, a genetic condition called craniosynosis, which is the sutures on the top of the head closed before time. And we did not know this. We went to many doctors, and the doctor was saying, "Oh, it's just she has a small head. Your wife has a small head. You have a small head. So it's no big deal about this." And we went around to see what's happening. She was bumping into things, losing balance. We did not know what it was. She was 1.5 years old. She couldn't communicate well. And at one point, we bumped into the Miami Children's Hospital, which one Cuban doctor actually saved her life. And one minimalistic exam, he found out that what she had it, which was very rare. But at this time, the brain grew inside the skull, would compress it, the optic nerve, and she ended up blind. But before that, she was really about to die. One more week of this, not knowing what it was, she would be dead. And we went through, as you imagine, went to the rink with this thing. She had 2 brain surgeries, and at one point, the second surgery, the doctor came out of it, and there was a situation which is the membrane that involves the brain, it's called dural. The dural was too thin, and a piece of the brain started really actually touching the skull after the surgery, and it was causing a lot of seizures. And imagine a 1.5-year-old kid who can't communicate well and started having seizures. We did not know what it was. It was a mess, But for me, number one thing, I do believe in God. I have faith in God. I'm not very religious, and my establishment is really my connection with God. I believe there's something superior, a superior power that we gotta trust. And at one point, you gotta believe there's something there that you're not in control, and you gotta give the wheel or the car to something that is bigger than you. It wasn't at the time that I did not know, how suffer was, but it was the worst situation in my life. And I carry pictures until today on my phone when I think I'd have a bad day, and I go back to that 3 months in the hospital, in the ICU, and at a certain point there right now, when me and my wife, what do we lived over there? It was simply, I don't think there's nothing worse in the world, is your kid. It's not natural. It's tragic. And I lived that thing, and my competition background helped me a lot, because you learn how to lose. And at one point, there was die, not dying, there's going to die, it's not going to die, and many doctors coming in and giving their perspective into it, and you have to deal with this thing. And I have other kids. And at one point, you have to believe in what comes is something superior. And if you can't do anything, you got to deal with the situation and deal not just with the stretches. You got to move on. You have to keep doing the things. There is a sad story, but it's a true story. I was in the wing of the Miami Children's Hospital, and the neurological wing, which is, there was 5 parents, 5 fathers. And we used to go 3 o'clock in the morning to drink some coffee and orange juice for the kids. And from the 5 parents, only my daughter and another one survived. all the other kids die with brain cancer and all the situations there. And I was, how grateful I was that, oh, my kids, your kid is blind. Oh, I can hug my kid, and the next day I can come back home. And my kid, with 18 years old right now, just got a super score in the SAT. She is scholarship and an operator at Orlando. She is, who knows, my daughter knows what I'm talking about this. But I knew it at one point, right there, there was something bigger that I have to believe. And my discipline of coming back the next day, that's what some people has the golden ticket to say, hey, I quit. I quit whatever it is. Or I'm self-medicate myself. I'm going to drink, and I'm going to smoke, and I'm going to do my drugs, or whatever it is. Not for me, it's not like this. I can't. I can't. Yet I know that I can't because my sport made me who I am. I can't hide myself and being a cheap, or a coward. I can't. It's not me. I'm taking my blows and I lose it and I suck it up and we come back in the next day. As hurtful as it is, but the way I lived that moment, I knew that, okay, bring it on. Because from here, it can't get too much worse than that, That's what it is. And I know that my sport helped me in life. I know that. It helped my family too. I know that.
But if you grew up in the biosphere, you wouldn't have been able to deal with that, right? Because everything would have been perfect. But I'm listening to you, and I'm thinking about my crazy life, and I could give 100 stories of things I went through, including one with my daughter in a hospital like that. But instead, I'd like to talk about my cousin, who I just went to see, I told you about earlier, who's dying right now. She might be gone. It's touch and go, but she's in her 70s. When she was in her 20s, beautiful woman, when she was in her 20s, married a guy. We come from an Italian neighborhood, very much like Goodfellas. Somebody showed up in the house, killed him. Her husband, they weren't even married a year. Married another guy years later. He got Parkinson's and died. Their daughter died of Parkinson's. Her sister died of cancer. Her parents died. I don't remember one time in the 50 years that I know her of her complaining, of her being negative, of her not wanting to make the meatballs when I go over the house, of her being positive. Like, she is a warrior, like you described. So, yeah, lots of people have it a lot worse than us in this room, and there's people that deal with it well, and there's people that don't. And when you see those warriors that just suck it up, because that's what you have to do. I mean, that's just...
But Joe, let me just interject just for 1 second here. At the time, I didn't think that I was dealing very well. For you to understand this, it's a tip of the iceberg that you think that success is this, that you see it right now, the way my daughter is, the way I live my life right now and everything else, but at the time it wasn't like this. At the time I had one thing. I wake up, I get out of bed, and I go. Right. Suck it up, and you do, and you face the problems. 'Cause my wife...
What's the alternative? There's no
alternative.
Right.
So, but you don't know this until you get that little thing. At the time, I thought it was the worst thing, and I think it's still the worst thing that I lived. And I went through, I can't even tell a million stories, man. But, but I just do it because you're conditioned to do it. Because this is what
You ever see imagery of, like, the Civil War or Vietnam or, like, I mean, even the story you just described, which was a tough story, or the one I just described, like, can you imagine? Like, we have it pretty friggin' easy.
We do. Well, unfortunately, we're running out of time. I want to be respectful. We have time for maybe one more question. If there's anybody that... anybody?
Carlos has a question. I'm just kidding, Carlos.
Thank you for sharing the story, guys. Appreciate that very much. Some people say that this generation is a little soft. What do you guys can share to help parents with the kids right now? Because I think COVID messed up a lot of young kids out there. So, what can you share about that?
So somebody said to me when we first had our children 19 years ago, you're going to be faced with a lot of choices when you're raising children. There'll be the hard way and the easy way. Always choose the hard way. And that's what we've done. And by the way, even with my stories, and I could sit here and brag, oh, my 7-year-old ran the New York Marathon, my 8-year-old ran the Boston Marathon. We've been pretty damn easy on them because they're not in Vietnam. They're not dealing with, all the stuff they could have been dealing with throughout history. But to your point, just manufacture adversity, make it hard on them. Don't let them fall off a cliff, but get them damn close.
That's true. That's so true. Well, for us, it's this, if you know what jiu-jitsu is and in training, and you see your kid getting smashed there, we see some of my parents there. Adam's there, Dr. Adam, Alejandro is there right now. But you see Alejandro getting passing through a hard time, training, and somebody smashing him right there. Do you want to interfere and stop the situation with him, or you want him to figure it out for himself, to get out of that situation? Or no, get up with your bruises and come back the next day. That's something that, and it's unfortunate we have to fabricate things like this. But for us in the martial arts, it's easier because you lived through this. You're losing it a lot. You may think you're a big dog. Wait to the corner. There's always a bigger dog. There's always somebody. And eventually you're going to get tired. And eventually you're going to get, sad or sick or whatever it is. And you're going to have a bad day. But in the moment you figured it out that you want your kid to not be a sheep and to be the wolf, life is changing for them. Dr. Adams is a great example of that. My parents too, I know that. My parents, they let those kids getting their bruises, getting out of there crying in a certain way, because you're not going to get a good day every time. But they're building their community, and at the same time, they're toughen up. They're learning,
Well, this is a great point to kind of bring all this together with that question. Thank you very much, because I have 3 kids. They're older now. They're all doing their own thing. And through the podcast, the conversations that you and I have had, and some of you in the audience, people have asked that question. It's like, is this generation too soft? And I don't think so. In fact, I think this generation of our kids is going to come out to be one of the toughest ones, because our human brain was not designed to deal with social media. Our human brain is, at least depending on who you talk to, between 250 to 500,000 years old in its current form, right? It wasn't designed to deal with the amount of stimulus and pressure. We grew up before the internet. I grew up in the 70s. We all grew up in the 70s, right? I cannot imagine the amount of stress on a young mind today with all the wolves craving for attention. And this is why I'm so grateful that you gave me your time today. You gave the audience, because the things that you guys are doing are the things that are needed in society and community to overcome the amount of stimulus that our children are being exposed to, and that our brains and their brains are not designed to deal with. Evolution is very slow, and the world has changed dramatically in only the past 50 years, only in the past 30 years. And the brain doesn't come up with new areas of cognition to deal with new social problems. That's not the way it works. So we're dealing with modern problems with a primitive brain. And it is through the work that you're doing, and many of you that are watching online and that are here present, that we're going to give those kids a chance to someday be remembered as actually a pretty tough generation. So I want to thank you all for being here on a Friday night. We've tried to do these on Wednesday nights, Thursday nights, Friday nights, and it's never really a perfect day to do them because there's always something going on. This is the last one for the year. Again, I want to thank Juan Santos, who's back there, who makes this possible, Reese, Lynn, who is behind the cameras, and all of you who support the efforts for this podcast. We have drinks and we have snacks, and both of my guests are gonna hang out, so you can, if you want pictures or want to say hi, please feel free to do so. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Rafa. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Joe, thank you.